Hi, this is my test rig. It's getting ready for testing my wing rigs to destruction. I want to make sure they actually carry the load of an aeroplane. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, watch this vid and see how I'm getting on so far. Cheers, see you shortly. I've got two more ribs partly made up. So the top cap strip is glued on. I've just got to sort out the bottom cap strips, which I'm screwing on, at least until they're on the spars, and I'll glue them at that point. But now I've been puzzling over the issues that come across with screwing these on. Now I've got my original one here. This is the good side. Oh, you can see there where a screw is trying to push through. It's on this side, and this is the good side. And that screw, and that screw. Now clearly that's not desirable, so I want to try and solve that before I start making, putting more screws into these. And the solution I've come up with is relatively simple. Come over to the bench. This is essentially a block of wood that I've run over my router to give it a 4mm clearance. So now my web ribs will just slot in there and held vertically, which is exactly where I want it. And from this side, before I made this cutout, I drilled a hole through the centre, and I made it large enough to fit a piece of brass tubing in, and the brass tubing is just large enough for the size of the drill that I want, which is right over here at the moment. This is my normal bench work state, by the way, so it's nothing unusual. So you get the mess. So that's the size drill bit I want, and that will fit into. Get a bit of light on that. You can see the pencil mark there, and that pencil mark ends in the piece of brass tubing, and the brass tubing's on the back here as well. So the next stage is I want to be able to locate that on the rib, and of course I can't do that if there's a piece of timber in the way, so I've chiseled this part out under the theory that I can afford to do that because the rest of it will hold it squarely in place, and that pencil mark allows me to find exactly where that drill bit's going to go. So the next stage, after having resolved that, I can now drill holes square and centre into my web ribs, is to figure out where I want to drill the hole. And that's going to be tricky because it also depends on where the hole is in the cap strip. The next thing to do is make a template for drilling holes centrally in a cap strip. And I'm essentially going to borrow the same idea. This piece of board is long enough for a cap strip, and I'm going to run it over my router to create a groove the same depth and width as a cap strip. Then I've got pencil marks on this cap strip where I need the screws, and in the centre of those pencil marks I'm going to drill a hole straight through the board. I may or may not do the same thing with the brass rod and push that through, but I'll see how I go with that. And that will enable me to put a blank cap strip immediately under this, drill a hole straight through it, exactly where I want the holes. Once I've got that, I can then use that to then mark the holes in the rib webs, which I can then take out and put into this jig. If that sounds a bit convoluted, I apologise, but it works well in my head, so I'm going to give it a go. A template for my cap strip screw holes coming on. I don't think you can see much like that. I'll just take this clip off, and so that's the cap strip. And what I've just done is I've marked where the holes are in the cap strip. Marked where the holes are. Used a nail to punch the hole, the centre hole. Drilled the centre hole straight through, so it's now gone and indented into the next piece of timber. And what I'm about to do, I'll just take these clips off. Do this cap strip out. Oops, get my finger into it. Okay. So I've now got holes in there, and I'm going to drill those out large enough to take some brass tubing. I'll insert some brass tubing, and then I'll have a template so I can get consistent holes for my cap strips without having to measure and mark every single one of them and hole punch them. So come along. Well, got my jig sorted out. The iridite's still setting, but it should be set enough for me to give it a go. So I'm just going to drill out a cap strip with the holes I need in it. Shouldn't take very long at all. Cool, there's 2 cap strips drilled through. Now I'm going to fit them back to the ribs they belong on and drill a pilot hole for 3 of these holes into the rib, so I can then use my new jig to drill a hole for the screw. It's a process. It appears to be centered, but I'm going to drill it a little bit deeper. I drilled it to make sure the tip of the screw was biting directly into the plywood, but that may have been a mistake. So I'll pull this one out, drill it a little bit deeper, which is just a matter of adjusting the drill depth on this, because the guide will do the rest, and then pop it back in. See how that looks. There's 2 ribs made out of scrap timber, and a couple of lessons learned out of that. Drill the holes deep enough, and when you reassemble it with the new holes, reassemble it in the jig. Don't trust that the new holes are in the right spot, as I found when I tried to put it back on. And take extra care of the front and over the very end holes at the front and the rear. The rear one I actually end up drilling through by mistake. Don't know if you can see that, but that's obviously not ideal, so I'll have to look out for that. But yes, pretty happy with that. So that's 2 practice runs. I've got a 3rd one to work on. It's also made out of scrap timber before I start using aircraft grade ply. But fingers crossed, I'll get the 3rd one done, then I'll make a test rig. I might as well break these ones because they're no good to me except as display pieces. And I've got a limited market for that, and then I'll start making proper ones. But getting there. Learning stuff on crappy timber is a great way to do it. Saves a lot of stress. Cool. I reckon you will recognise this from earlier in the video. I've sanded down the right hand side, and that now matches the curve of the tailpiece, which then assists with creating the hole I need for the last screw. My test rig is coming together. It's got a rib in the top, as you can see, and a bucket underneath just for sizing purposes. I'm clearly not going to be able to get 8 20-litre buckets under this, but actually I don't need to anyway. So getting a little bit closer. So some decent pieces of spruce, because I've got plenty of that obviously. Some ply, because I've got plenty of spare ply. This isn't the expensive stuff, this is just bulk standard ply. This piece on the top here, this one, is there pretty much so partly to hold the level, but mostly so I can mark it off for the measurements for where the weights are being hung off the ribs. So as you can see, this stretches to the front of the rib, so I can mark on there, then just iometer the actual rib itself to make sure I've got the weights in the right places. So I'll mark it all the way along here in the right spots. So next stage for this is to lift up the rib and have pieces of ash, which I've got here, piece of ash mounted sideways, and that'll prop up the bottom of the spars. And the spars, when they're finished, will be sitting at the top of these uprights, so up here on both ends. So getting there. Then I'm about to test the first rib to destruction, and it should fail easily because it's made out of rubbish timber and it has 1 or 2 flaws in it. But that'll give me a low point for everything else, which would be nice to know. Right, I'll crack on. Just mounting this first rib to the spar mock-up, and you see on the bottom here I've got 2 strips, cap strips, with a groove in the centre for the rib web. And all I need to do now is just squeeze that on. I've done the same for the back. It's all ready to go. So now I need to apply glue to the bottom edges, and then screw the cap strip, which is lying here, all ready to go, onto that, and let that dry and harden, and that'll be ready for testing. I've just got a couple more bits to finish off on the test rig. Tidy this up, and I've got to figure out ways of sorting out weights. And to that end, what you see out here is a couple of bags of sand, which I've got to sort out and see if I can use those to create the weight I need. But that'll be the next little test. So getting there. Rib in place, glued and screwed. First lot of sandbags. Need more sand. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll catch up with you next week. Yeah, a little more than that.